Arizona Territory, 1884, a land of red rock canyons, rattlesnakes, and men who carved their fates out of dust and danger. Jake Hollister had lived here most of his life, long enough to know that trouble usually announced itself through gunshots, hoofbeats, or loud drunks in a saloon. But on this particular morning, trouble arrived in a quieter, stranger way. Jake was fixing the broken wheel of a traveling trader's wagon. The man was desperate, sweaty, nervous, glancing over his shoulder as if he expected someone to come riding over the horizon any second. Jake didn't ask questions. He wasn't the type. He simply tightened the bolts and wiped the sweat from his brow. "That should hold," Jake said, stepping back. The trader exhaled with visible relief. "Thank you, Cowboy. You saved me more than you know." Jake shrugged, "Just doing a good turn, no charge." But the man stiffened. "No, payment must be given." Jake waved it off. "I don't need anything." Yet the trader insisted with a frantic tone. Before Jake could argue more, two rough-looking guards dragged someone from the back of the wagon. Jake's breath caught. It wasn't goods, tools, or a bag of coins. It was a girl. Young, maybe 18 or 19, Apache by her clothing and hair. Her wrists were tied, dust smeared across her cheek, but her eyes were bright flames of pride and defiance. She stood tall even with rope cutting into her skin. "This is all I can offer," the trader said, voice trembling. "Take her." Jake's jaw locked. "I'm not taking a person as payment. Untie her." But the trader only backed away faster. "Please don't refuse. If you don't take her, they'll come for me. They'll kill me." Jake stepped forward, furious. "You can't just—" But it was too late. The guards pushed the girl toward Jake, then jumped onto the wagon. The trader snapped the reins in panic, the wagon rolling away fast, leaving a cloud of dust swirling in the morning air. Jake stood there in stunned silence. The girl, still bound, watched the wagon disappear with no expression at all. Only the rise and fall of her chest showed she was breathing. Finally Jake muttered, "Hell of a mess." He knelt and gently loosened the rope around her wrists. She didn't speak, didn't flinch, didn't look away. Her silence wasn't fear, it was strength. "You're free now," Jake told her. "Go on, you can leave." But instead of running, she shook her head once and pointed toward the distant blue-shadowed mountains. "My tribe be far." Her voice was soft but firm. Jake exhaled slowly. She couldn't travel alone. Not with that trader still out there, not with whoever was chasing her, not across miles of hostile land. "You can stay at my ranch tonight," he said. "Tomorrow I'll help you find your people." She nodded, almost imperceptibly. Jake looked toward the fatting dust trail of the wagon. Whatever this girl's story was, he already knew it wasn't simple. The sun dipped low over the Arizona desert as Jake Hollister and the Apache girl walked toward his ranch. She moved quietly, lightly, like someone used to the land, barely disturbing the dust under her feet. Jake kept a respectful distance, not wanting to frighten her more than she already had been. She finally spoke when they reached the wooden fence line. "You cowboy," she said slowly, her English careful but clear. "Why help me?" Jake glanced at her, surprised she was speaking at all. "Didn't seem right to leave you tied up in desert heat. That trader had no business keeping you like that." Her eyes hardened for a moment. "He stole me." Jake nodded. It confirmed what he'd already suspected. "I figured." He opened the creaky gate and motioned her inside. She hesitated only a second before stepping through. The ranch house was modest, wooden porch, a few rocking chairs, warm lantern light glowing through the windows. It wasn't fancy, but it was peaceful. Jake led her inside and gestured toward a chair. "Sit, I'll get water." The girl didn't sit. Instead, she stood in the middle of the room, hands clasped behind her back, eyes wandering over everything, rifles on the wall, worn leather boots near the door, the old Navajo blanket draped over the sofa. It was as if she was cataloging every detail, committing them to memory. Jake returned with a tin cup. "Here." She took it with both hands, sipped slowly, then finally eased into the chair. Her shoulders relaxed just a little. "What's your name?" Jake asked. She hesitated, then said, "Naily." It suited her, soft yet strong. "I'm Jake," he replied, "Jake Hollister." She nodded once, studying him with an intensity that made him shift uncomfortably. Most folks in town barely gave Jake a second glance, but this girl, her focus felt like she was searching for something beneath the surface. "You live alone," she said, not a question, a statement. "Been that way a long time." She took another sip of water. "You have no wife?" Jake let out a short breath. "No, no wife." Naily's gaze softened. "You are lonely." Jake didn't answer. He didn't have to, his silence told her enough. After a long, quiet moment, she set the cup down. "That traitor, he was hunted by my people." Jake's head snapped up. "Your tribe, why?" Naily looked toward the window, toward the distant mountains. "He stole me because he thought Apache would trade gold for a chief's daughter." Jake froze. "Chief's daughter?" She nodded, her expression unreadable. "My father leads my people. The traitor thought I was payment, bargaining, but he was wrong." Jake rubbed a hand across his jaw. "Damn, so when that man said people were after him, he meant your tribe." Naily met his eyes. "They are close." That sent a chill down Jake's spine. If the tribe arrived and found her on his ranch, things could get dangerous fast. But Naily didn't look afraid. She leaned forward slightly. "You saved me today. My people will know. They will see." Jake swallowed, feeling the shift in the air, the beginning of something bigger than either of them. The sun had barely risen when Jake woke to the sound of distant hoofbeats, steady, rhythmic, determined. He sat up sharply, instinct kicking in. Out here in the open desert, hoofbeats usually meant riders, and riders could mean trouble. Naily was already awake. She stood by the window, her posture tall and composed, her long braids draped over her shoulders. She didn't look frightened. If anything, she looked expectant. Jake pulled on his boots. "Tell me that's not who I think it is." Naily turned, her expression calm. "My people have found me." Jake muttered a quiet curse. "How many?" "6 warriors, maybe more behind them." She said it like she was talking about the weather. Not like a group of armed Apache warriors were riding straight toward his isolated ranch. Jake grabbed his hat. "If they think I took you, this could turn ugly real fast." Naily walked toward him, her movements controlled and deliberate. "I will speak for you." "That doesn't always matter," Jake said. "Sometimes folks see what they want to see." But Naily stepped closer, close enough that Jake could see the gold flecks in her dark eyes. "Jake Hollister, my people honor truth, and I will tell them you are not enemy." Right then, the hoofbeats grew louder, close enough that Jake could feel the vibrations through the floorboards. "Damn," he whispered, "they're here." They stepped outside together. The first rider came over the ridge like a shadow against the rising sun, then another, then 4 more, all armed, bows, spears, rifles, faces painted for tracking. These were not casual visitors, they were rescue warriors. Jake kept his hands loose at his sides, palms visible, no sudden moves. The lead warrior dismounted and stepped forward. He was tall, broad-shouldered, eyes sharp as flint. He said something in Apache, a short command loaded with authority. Naily answered calmly, her voice strong. The warrior's gaze snapped to Jake. He stepped forward, close enough that Jake could smell the leather on his chest strap and the dust on his skin. He spoke again, this time in broken English. "You take her." Jake straightened. "No, I saved her." The warrior looked unconvinced. His hand hovered near his weapon. Jake felt sweat trickle down his neck. Naily moved between them without hesitation. "He speaks truth," she said firmly. "The traitor stole me. The cowboy freed me." She placed a hand over her heart. "He protected me." That made the warriors exchange glances. The leader stepped closer to Naeli, lowering his voice. Jake didn't understand the words, but he recognized the tone. Concern, disbelief, something like relief. Then the warrior looked back at Jake. "You helped Chief's daughter," he said slowly. "Why?" Jake didn't puff himself up or pretend to be some hero. He simply shrugged. "Because she needed help. Anyone with a conscience would have done the same." Naeli watched him with an expression Jake couldn't quite read, soft but intense, almost grateful in a way beyond simple thanks. The lead warrior studied Jake for a long moment. Then, unexpectedly, he nodded. "You come," the warrior said. "Chief wishes to see you." Jake blinked. "Me, why?" Naeli stepped closer to him. "My father must decide what happens now." Jake felt the weight of it settle on him like a stone. Whatever happened next wasn't going to be simple. Jake Hollister rode behind the Apache warriors, feeling the weight of 100 unspoken fears pressing against his ribs. The morning sun was rising fast, turning the desert gold. But Jake wasn't admiring the view. He was thinking about what might happen when they reached the Apache camp. Naeli rode beside him, calm as still water. She glanced at him briefly. "You are not in danger," she said softly. "My people value honor." Jake gave a tense smile. "Let's hope they see mine." The warriors led them through a narrow pass between towering red cliffs. Smoke drifted into the air from fires up ahead. Soon they entered a valley dotted with dozens of tall wickiups and moving figures, women preparing food, children chasing each other, elders sitting near the fires. Every head turned toward Jake. He felt the stares like arrows, distrust, curiosity, suspicion. A few warriors stepped forward, forming a protective half-circle around Naeli. Jake didn't miss how close their hands were to their weapons. One of them said sharply in Apache, and Jake sensed they were questioning her, not about the traitor but about Jake himself. But Naeli held her ground. Then an older warrior with gray streaks in his braids approached. His presence commanded immediate respect. This was someone important. Naeli bowed her head slightly. "Father." So this was the chief. The chief looked first at his daughter, checking her condition, searching her face to make sure she wasn't harmed. Only then did he turn to Jake. His eyes were sharp, eyes that had seen battles, treaties, betrayals, and centuries of conflict between their peoples. He spoke in his native tongue. Naeli translated, "My father asks why you brought me back." Jake cleared his throat. "Didn't feel right leaving you in danger." The chief listened, expression unreadable. He spoke again, longer this time. Naeli translated slowly. "He says, no cowboy helps an Apache without wanting something. He asks what you expect in return." Jake's jaw tightened. "Nothing, not a damn thing." The warriors murmured at his tone. Naeli lifted her chin slightly, defending him. "He tells truth." But the chief wasn't finished. He stepped forward, inspecting Jake like a man evaluating a stranger's soul. Finally, he spoke directly, in broken English. "You saved Chief's daughter." His voice was deep, steady. "That debt must be answered." Jake felt a knot twist in his stomach. "I don't want payment." The chief raised a hand. "Debt must be answered," he repeated firmly. "Apache law." He pointed toward the center of the camp, where a group of women had gathered. Jake took a step back. "Now hold on." Naeli gently touched his arm. "It is not what you fear." Her father continued speaking, and she translated. "He says you are invited to stay, to eat with us, to be honored as friend, not enemy." Jake blinked. That was unexpected. But then Naeli's voice softened as she translated her father's final words. "He also says, saving a chief's daughter is more than honorable deed. It binds two families. He wishes to know if you will accept this bond." Jake's heart thudded. The warriors fell silent. The camp fell silent. Even the wind seemed to stop. Jake swallowed. "What kind of bond?" Naeli met his eyes. Her cheeks flushed, but her expression was steady. "If you accept," she whispered, "you will become part of my father's family, and I will be given to you." Jake froze. Not as a slave, not as payment, but as something far more serious. A promised woman. Jake Hollister stood rooted to the packed dirt of the Apache camp, the chief's words echoing in his mind like distant thunder. Given to you. The meaning hung heavy between him and Nayeli, too heavy for a simple cowboy to fully grasp in the moment. Nayeli watched him carefully, her expression unreadable but her eyes searching his. "You are surprised," she said softly. Jake let out a shaky breath. That's one word for it. Around them, warriors stood silent, waiting for his answer. Women whispered behind cupped hands. Even the children seemed to feel the tension. The entire camp was holding its breath. The chief stepped closer, his presence powerful and unyielding. He spoke once more, and Nayeli translated. "He says honor demands balance. You saved his blood. Now he must offer you a place among us." Jake shook his head. "I didn't do it for reward." Nayeli tilted her head. "In Apache way, this is not reward, it is respect." Jake glanced at the chief, then back at Nayeli. There was a weight in her eyes, a story behind her calm exterior. He didn't fully understand it, but he sensed this moment meant more to her than she let on. The chief raised his hand. The camp fell silent. Nayeli whispered, "He asks if you accept the bond." Jake opened his mouth to speak, then stopped. His whole life he'd lived alone. No wife, no children, no family waiting for him at night. Nothing but the ranch, his horses, his quiet dinners by a dusty window. He wasn't the type of man a tribe welcomed. He wasn't even sure he deserved to be. But when he looked at Nayeli, something shifted. She wasn't offering fear or obligation. She wasn't a burden being handed off. She stood proudly, as someone who would honor him if he honored her. "Before I answer," Jake said slowly, "I need to understand something." The chief nodded for him to speak. Jake turned to Nayeli. "Do you want this, or is this just your father's law?" The question surprised her. Her lips parted slightly, and for the first time her confidence wavered. She looked down, gathering her words carefully. "I did not think I would ever return home. The traitor, he planned to sell me far away. You saved me from that fate." She lifted her gaze again, and Jake saw vulnerability behind her strength. "When my father offers bond, it is not to give away property." Her voice softened. "It is to join two lives with honor, but I can refuse if my heart says no." Jake noticed her hands tremble faintly. Then she said the quiet truth. "I do not refuse." That revelation struck him harder than any blow could have. The chief watched them with an elder's wisdom, understanding far more than he let on. He spoke one final time. "He asks again," Nayeli translated. "Cowboy, do you accept?" The entire Apache camp fell still. Jake Hollister looked at Nayeli, really looked at her. A woman who faced captivity, danger, uncertainty, and still stood strong. A woman who could have any warrior at her side, yet didn't turn away from him. Slowly Jake stepped forward. "I accept." Nayeli's breath caught. The chief nodded solemnly, satisfied. Warriors exhaled. Women murmured blessings. A drum sounded from the far side of camp, a low, rhythmic beat marking the beginning of something sacred. Nayeli whispered, almost in disbelief, "You chose me." Jake gave a small, earnest smile. "Looked like you chose me first." And for the first time since he'd arrived, she smiled, soft, shy, but brighter than the rising Arizona sun. The Apache camp buzzed with low, rhythmic activity as the sun dipped behind the red cliffs, bathing everything in deep amber light. The moment Jake said, "I accept," the atmosphere shifted, softening, warming, almost like the camp itself exhaled in relief. But Jake wasn't fully relaxed. Not yet. He followed Nayeli and two warriors toward the central fire, where the tribe gathered for evening meals. The flames crackled, casting dancing shadows across decorated hides and painted faces. Children laughed nearby, women stirred cooking pots, and elders sat cross-legged, watching everything with timeless, knowing eyes. Jake felt those eyes on him. All of them. Nayeli walked ahead with quiet confidence. She did not shrink under the attention. She did not shy away or hide. Instead, she stood taller than she had all day, like a woman reclaiming her place. When she reached the fire, she turned and extended a hand. "Sit with me," she said gently. Jake hesitated. This was her world, not his, but something in her invitation, soft yet strong, made him take her hand and sit beside her on a woven mat. The chief joined them moments later. The crowd fell still. He addressed the camp in Apache, voice deep and steady. Though Jake couldn't understand the words, he understood the meaning. Nayeli translated quietly for him. "My father says, a man who risks himself for another shows the spirit of a warrior. Jake Hollister has acted with honor. Tonight, he sits as a guest, protected and respected." Jake lowered his head slightly. "I'm grateful." Nayeli smiled, small but warm. "They see your honesty." Food was passed around: roasted venison, corn cakes, stewed beans, juniper tea. Jake accepted each dish with gratitude, surprised by how naturally the tribe included him. But he could still feel some skeptical stares. A few young warriors eyed him with thinly veiled challenge, as if deciding whether he was worthy of Nayeli or of the chief's trust. Nayeli noticed. She leaned closer. "Do not fear them, they test all strangers." Jake smirked. "I've been tested before." "But not by Apache," she replied with a playful seriousness. He chuckled softly. Soon the drums started, a steady heartbeat rhythm. Women began a low chant, men added deeper tones, and children tapped tiny sticks together. The air vibrated with a kind of spiritual energy Jake had never felt before. Nayeli rose gracefully and spoke to him. "Come." Jake blinked. "For what?" She offered her hand again. "Dance." Jake laughed nervously. "Nayeli, I've got 2 left feet." "That is fine," she said, eyes bright. "Dance is not to be perfect, it is to show heart." He hesitated only a second before taking her hand. They stepped into the circle around the fire. The drum beats pulsed through the ground and up Jake's legs. Nayeli guided him gently, showing him when to step, when to turn, when to lift his hands with the rhythm. Her fingers touched his lightly, her smile encouraging and patient. Jake felt awkward, then less awkward, then strangely at peace. For the first time in years, he felt like he belonged somewhere. When the dance ended, the tribe clapped softly. The young warrior's stares had changed, less suspicion, more respect. Nayeli leaned toward him and whispered, "You honored our ways, my people see." Jake looked at her, the fire reflecting in her dark eyes. "I'm learning," he said quietly. She touched his arm, her voice barely above a breath. "You are doing more than learning, Jake Hollister. You are becoming part of my world." Jake felt her words settle inside him, warm, steady, and dangerously comforting. That night, as the fire crackled and the tribe drifted into relaxed conversation, Jake realized something. He hadn't just accepted a bond. He had stepped into a life-changing path. One that led directly toward Nayeli. Morning light spilled across the Apache Valley, and Jake Hollister woke not to silence, but to the steady, purposeful movements of warriors preparing for something important. The camp carried a different energy, focused, alert, almost ceremonial. Nayeli approached him with a calm grace, her braids swinging gently. "My father wants to speak with you," she said. Jake stood, brushing dirt from his shirt. "What's going on?" She hesitated before answering. "A test." Jake raised an eyebrow. "A test for me." Nayeli nodded. "It is tradition. Any man who accepts a bond to a chief's daughter must prove he can stand with her people." Jake let out a long breath. Thought accepting the bond last night was enough of a test. She gave him a soft smile. They must know you can protect, provide, respect, not just say words. Jake swallowed. This tribe lived by honor, ritual, strength, and he respected that. But he also knew one wrong move could ruin everything. They walked together toward a clearing where warriors stood in a wide circle. The chief waited in the center with his staff decorated in eagle feathers. When he saw Jake, he spoke firmly in Apache. Naeli translated quietly at his side. My father says this is not punishment. It is a right, a way for our warriors to see your spirit. Jake glanced around the circle. Some warriors looked neutral, others skeptical, and a few, especially the young ones, clearly hoped he'd fail. What kind of test? Jake asked. Naeli's eyes softened. 3 parts: strength, skill, and heart. Jake grunted. Sounds like a long morning. The first warrior stepped forward, tall and broad-shouldered, with paint marking his cheeks. The chief gestured toward a heavy elk-hide shield and a wooden staff. Naeli whispered, strength test. You do not fight to win, only to endure. Jake lifted the shield. It was heavier than he expected. The warrior charged, striking with controlled force. Jake absorbed the blow, sliding back a step. Another hit. And another. The crowd murmured, watching how he handled each strike. Jake dug in his boots, held his shield firm and didn't fall. The chief raised a hand. The warrior stepped back with a nod of respect. Jake sucked in a breath, 1 down. Naeli smiled. Yes, you endure well. Next came skill. A warrior tossed Jake a lasso and pointed toward 3 posts set in the ground at different distances. Jake smirked. Now this I know. 3 throws, 3 perfect loops. The warriors murmured in surprise. Jake tipped his hat slightly. Naeli's pride was obvious. They did not expect that. I'm full of surprises, Jake said. But the final test. The chief walked to Jake and held out a small clay pot. Inside it rested a tiny injured bird, its wing twisted, trembling. Naeli's expression grew tender. This is the heart test. They want to see how you treat something weaker than yourself. Jake knelt immediately, cradling the fragile creature with gentle hands. He whispered softly, soothing it, then carefully adjusted its wing, wrapping it with a thin strip of cloth another woman handed him. When he rose, holding the bird safely, the entire camp went silent. Even the skeptical warriors watched him with new eyes. The chief spoke, and this time Naeli's voice trembled as she translated. My father says, a man who protects life is a man who protects family. Jake swallowed the emotion rising in his chest. Then the chief laid a strong hand on Jake's shoulder and spoke one final line. Naeli's voice caught as she whispered. He says you have passed, all 3. The circle of warriors lowered their weapons and stepped back. Naeli's eyes shone, not just with relief but with a deep personal pride. You did it, she breathed. Jake looked at her, realizing something powerful. He hadn't passed these trials for the tribe. He'd passed them for her. The Apache camp glowed with the soft orange light of evening as Jake Hollister returned from the trials. His arms were sore, his boots dusty, and his muscles ached from the warrior's strength test, but his spirit felt strangely light. He had passed, but the trials weren't what stayed in his mind. Naeli's eyes were. Pride. Relief. Something warmer, deeper, unspoken. She walked beside him now, close enough that her arm brushed his whenever their steps aligned. My father prepares the final ceremony, she said softly, to seal the bond if you still wish it. Jake exhaled, do you? Naeli stopped walking. The camp sounds faded, the crackling fires, the murmuring women, the distant laughter of children. Only the quiet evening wind whispered through the cliffs. She lifted her gaze to him. When I was taken, I thought I would never see my people again, never see the sky of my home, never hear my father's voice. She paused, steadying her breath. You changed that. You brought me back to the world I love. Jake swallowed. Anyone would have helped. No, she said firmly, not anyone. Her voice softened. You risked yourself for a stranger. You stood before my people without fear. You faced the warriors with honor, and you touched the wounded bird like it was precious. She stepped closer. You showed heart. Jake looked at her, feeling something in him settle into place, something that had been restless for years. Nayeli, he said quietly, I'm not perfect. I don't have a tribe or a family or much to offer besides a quiet ranch and a lot of open land. She smiled, soft, warm, a little shy. Then we will fill that land with new life, with laughter, with future. His breath caught. You'd really leave your tribe. Her smile didn't fade. A daughter does not leave. She carries her people wherever she goes. Before Jake could speak, a low drumbeat sounded from the center of camp. Warriors gathered. Women lit torches. The chief stood tall beside a fire ring decorated with feathers, stones, and painted symbols. Nayeli took Jake's hand. Come, it is time. They walked into the ceremonial circle. The tribe fell silent. The chief spoke powerfully in Apache. Nayeli translated softly. He says, a life saved is a life tied. A bond accepted is a path shared. Tonight, two spirits join. A warrior handed Jake a carved wooden token, half of a circle, its edge jagged. Nayeli held the other half. Jake looked into her eyes. We put them together. She nodded, two halves, one bond. He pressed his token to hers. The pieces fit perfectly, forming a single whole. The tribe erupted in approving chants. The chief raised his staff. From this night, Nayeli translated, you are part of our family, and she is now tied to you with trust and honor. Jake felt his chest tighten, emotion, disbelief, something fierce and gentle all at once. Nayeli leaned close, her forehead touching his. Jake Hollister, she whispered, I choose you. Jake closed his eyes, and I choose you. The drums swelled, the fire roared, the tribe celebrated. And among the flames, the music, and the desert stars, Jake realized something. He hadn't just saved a chief's daughter. He had found his partner, his family, his future. And he would spend the rest of his life honoring the bond they sealed that night. Together,